Hello students, I hope you're all having a great day so far. Today's woman of the day is a very important person named Sojourner Truth, and this book is called So Tall Within, Sojourner Truth's Long Walk Toward Freedom. It's written by Gary D. Schmidt and illustrated by Daniel Minter. So that means Gary D. Schmidt wrote the words and Daniel Minter drew the pictures. In slavery time, when hope was a seed waiting to be planted, Isabella lived in a cellar where the windows never let the sun in and the floorboards never kept the water out. She had 10 or 12 brothers and sisters. She couldn't be sure, since almost all of them were sold as slaves before she was old enough to remember. Wow. So in her house, there were no windows, and there was water on the floor, and she had a lot of brothers and sisters, but she didn't even know them because they were sold away to other families. But Mama Bet, her mother, kept them in memory. Sometimes at night, she held Isabella and pointed to the skies over New York. Those are the same stars, and that is the same moon that looked down upon your brothers and sisters, she whispered. And Isabella looked at those same stars, that same moon, and dreamed. She dreamed about her other siblings because it's not fair. It was very wrong that her siblings were sold away. When Isabella was about 9, she was sold for $100 along with a flock of sheep. Mama Bet held her one last time. So she had to go away from her mom. Somebody was buying her as if she was like a toy or something to be bought. This was very wrong. They would always remember to look at those same stars and that same moon, even though they would be ever so far away from each other. Every night after that, Isabella kept her eyes wide open. So Isabella was separated from her mother because somebody bought her as if she was just something that could be bought. She was sold as a slave. In slavery time, when happiness was a dream never coming true, Isabella was put to work. Now the war begun, she thought. First she worked for Mr. Neely, who figured she didn't need shoes in wintertime. Don't you need shoes in wintertime? Something we know about winter is that it's very cold. So the person that owned her didn't even let her wear shoes when it was cold. So how do you think her feet felt? Probably cold. 2 years later, she worked for Mr. Shriver, who had her carry fish and hoe corn and dig roots and tend herbs and tote gallons of dark molasses. So that she was working a lot, and she was just a kid. A year and a half after that, she worked for Mr. Dumont, who bragged that Isabella could do a good family's washing in the night and be ready in the morning to go into the field. So they wanted her to work in the day and in the night. And she did, night after night, day after day, night after night, day after day, night after night, day after day. She was working. Look, that's her, just a kid working. Does that look very fair? Do you think kids should have been working? No. But sometimes she looked up at those stars and that moon, and she asked God if he thought it was right. In slavery time, when respect fell as often as snow in July. So does it snow in July? July is in the summer, and in the summer it's hot. Does it snow when it's hot? No. Mr. Dumont ordered Isabella to marry a slave named Thomas. She had 5 children: James, who died when he was a baby, Diana, Peter, Elizabeth, and Sophia. So the person that owned her forced her to marry somebody. That's not fair. At night, under the light of those stars and that moon, she wondered if her children and her children's children would always be slaves too. So she was worried that her babies would have the same life as her, owned by somebody else. In slavery time, when promises were thin as old smoke, Mr. Dumont swore that if she would do well, he would free Isabella and give her a log cabin to live in by the next summer, a year before all the slaves in New York had to be freed by law. But the summer came and the summer passed. Oh, thought Isabella, I have felt as if I could not live. So the person who bought her said that she would be able to be free, but he lied and she was not free. So that fall, after the work of the harvest was done, she held her baby Sophia close and seized freedom with her own hand. Look, do you see this picture? She's running away from her slave owner because she doesn't think it's fair. And he said she was going to get to be free, and she wasn't. So now she's running away with her baby. Along the road, she came to the house of Isaac and Maria Van Wagener. They welcomed her inside. They promised they would never abandon her. They were there when Mr. Dumont found Isabella. You've run away from me, said Mr. Dumont. No, said Isabella. I walked away by daylight. You must go back, he said. So she was caught. But Isabella shook her head. I shall take your child, said Mr. Dumont. But Isaac and Maria kept their promise. They paid. So the people whose house they went to gave Mr. Dumont money so that he wouldn't take them away. Mr. Dumont's price for all the work Isabella might have done before she was freed by law, and they paid his price for her baby, and Mr. Dumont left. So Mr. Dumont accepted that money and let her be free. But that's not fair. They shouldn't have had to give him any money. Isabella asked Isaac and Maria if they were her new masters. Isaac shook his head. He was master to no one, he said. And now Isabella was slave to no one. So now Isabella was free, and she could be with her baby. But in slavery time, can you see? But in slavery time, broken promises were like leaves on a tree. Are there leaves on a tree? Yes, so they're saying that in times of slavery, a lot of people would break their promises. Mr. Dumont sold Isabella's 5-year-old son, Peter. They sold away one of her babies to Mr. Gedney, who sent him down south. Though Isabella could not read or write, she knew that in New York, where they lived, no slave could be sold outside of the state's borders. Isabella, on foot and alone, went to the Dumont house and knocked on the door. She knocked hard. And when it opened, she said, I'll have my child. Mrs. Dumont shook her head. A fine fuss to make, she said, and closed the door. So she shut the door on her face and kept her baby inside. So Isabella walked to the Gedney house and knocked on the door. I must have my child. Mrs. Gedney told her that Peter had gone to live with her married daughter to have enough of everything and be treated like a gentleman. But Isabella knew this was a lie. My boy has gone as a slave, and he is too little to go so far from his mother, she said. Mrs. Gedney closed the door. So that person was not helping her find her son. But Isabella thought, I felt so tall within. I felt as if the power of a nation was with me. Isabella traveled miles and miles across New York to Kingston to tell her story to the grand jury. They saw how tall within she was. They gave her a letter for the sheriff demanding that Peter be brought home. She took the letter and walked miles and miles back. Peter was already far away in Alabama, but Mr. Gedney read the letter and knew he must obey the court. He went down south to find Peter while Isabella waited and prayed. God, help me get my son. If you were in trouble, as I am, and I could help you, as you can help me, you think I wouldn't do it? After a few months, Isabella held Peter again, so she got her son back. But the Alabama masters had whipped Peter and kicked him and beaten him. They hurt her son. He would never really heal, and that was slavery. So slavery was a lot of pain. A lot of people were hurt. In slavery time, when chains tore families apart like the wind frays a flag, Isabella still looked up at those stars and that moon and hoped her brothers and sisters saw them too. They did. A year after Peter was free, he and Isabella moved to New York City, where she met a woman named Nancy at Zion's church. When they held hands, Isabella said, "The bony hardness was just like mine." But Nancy passed away. Soon afterward, she met her sister Sophia, and then her brother Michael, who had been stolen from her long ago. They told her they'd had another sister in the city, but that she had just died, and her name was also Nancy. Then Isabella understood that one of the first people she had met in New York was her own sister, but she didn't know it. Wow, she met somebody, she shook their hand, and that was her sister, and she didn't know that was her sister. What is this slavery, wondered Isabella, that it can do such dreadful things? So because of slavery, she shook her sister's hand and didn't even know it was her sister because they were taken apart from each other. Perhaps that was the moment Isabella knew she had a journey to make under those stars and that moon. It would be a journey, a sojourn. So sojourn means journey. To tell the truth about slavery, and that maybe then slavery would end forever. More than 15 years after she walked away from the Dumonts, Isabella changed her name to Sojourner Truth. Oh, remember how I told you this book is about Sojourner Truth? So her name used to be Isabella, and then she changed it. And she began to walk again. So this is now Sojourner Truth, whose name used to be Isabella. She changed it. And sojourn means journey. And a journey is like a long trip. Like you can go on a journey somewhere. And this is her walking. She's on a journey. In slavery time, when words seem weaker than whips, Sojourner Truth left New York City with a bundle of clothing on one arm and a basket of food on the other. She began to speak out against slavery to whoever would listen. Not everyone wanted to hear, but she had the lever of truth, so she spoke. In Massachusetts, she said, "What a beautiful world this would be when we would see everything right side up." In Ohio, she said that she had seen some of her children sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard. In Indiana, she said, "The truth is powerful and will prevail." So just like Barbara Jordan, who we learned about yesterday, 2 days ago, Sojourner Truth had a very strong voice, and she's using her voice. In slavery time, when tiredness stood at the doorway, Sojourner Truth walked all the way to Washington, D.C. And that's also where Barbara Jordan walked, all the way to Washington, D.C. There she met Abraham Lincoln. This is Abraham Lincoln. And she told him he was the best president who has ever taken the seat. So at the time, Abraham Lincoln was the president. In Michigan, she collected food and clothing for the black regiments of free men and former slaves fighting in the Civil War to end slavery. In Virginia, she worked with the Freedmen's Bureau to teach liberated slaves, so free slaves, how to live in freedom. And when some people wanted to stop her, she warned that if they tried, she would rock the United States like a cradle. So she was so strong. She walked all the way right up to the president. And in Washington, D.C., when a streetcar conductor would not pull up for her, she said, "I want to ride," so loudly that the carriage traffic around them stopped. And she got on. So she really did have a powerful voice. The conductor threatened to throw her off, but she told him that she knew the laws as well as he did, and she stayed on and rode longer than she had planned to make the most of it. For years and years, Sojourner Truth walked and told her story and fought for freedom. And when slavery time finally ended, she felt so tall within. In freedom time, when hope kindled a fire in the dark and happiness winked over the horizon, Sojourner Truth told an audience in Massachusetts, "Children, I have come here like the rest of you to hear what I have to say." And what she had to say was plenty. She spoke of a woman's right to vote. So again, this book is talking about voting. And remember, voting is like When you vote, you can raise your hand. You can vote one time, like for a meditation video, to show what you want. She was saying that women get to vote because back then they said that only men could vote. So imagine if for our videos, only the boys could raise their hand to vote. Would that be fair? No, boys and girls should get to vote. And that's what Sojourner Truth thought. She spoke about making prisons more humane. She asked the government to offer land to former slaves. She spoke against capital punishment. For almost 15 more years, she walked thousands of miles. Wow, imagine how tired you'd be if you walked over 1,000 miles to Philadelphia and to Brooklyn and to Washington, D.C., and to Kansas and Iowa and Missouri and Wisconsin and Illinois and Michigan. Wow, she was walking all over our country to all these different states. And everywhere she went, she spoke about freedom. She walked everywhere. In freedom time, when respect wanted to show its face and broken promises tried to mend, Sojourner Truth walked to Battle Creek, Michigan, where she lived with her free daughters and free grandchildren. And Sojourner Truth was weary and ready to lay down her lever. So now she looks pretty tired. I'd be tired too if I walked that much. In freedom time, when chains broke, when chains broke and words got up to sing and tiredness, oh tiredness, danced a hallelujah, Sojourner Truth asked herself, what is anybody in the world for? Then she looked at those same stars, that same moon, and she saw them shining over everyone. And she knew what she had been in the world for. I had a work to do, she thought. My lost time that I lost being a slave was made up. Oh, and it looks like that's the end. So that's our story. I'm just checking. That was our story about Sojourner Truth. And now you can get out your paper. Make sure you have all of your parts. First thing you do is you write your name. Then you write the word biography and the date. And this person's name, what was the person's name? At first it was Isabella, but she changed her name to Sojourner Truth. And what she was famous for was that she fought against slavery. She did not think slavery was right, and it was very, very wrong. She fought against it. And this is my drawing of her. I wanted the drawing to look like the book, so let me show you the book again. But you can draw her however you want to draw her. For my 4 facts, the first one I wrote was that she was sold away from her family. So remember when she was 9 years old, somebody bought her as if she was an object, and she's a person. It's not okay to sell people. That's not how you treat people. It's not right. But she was sold away from her family. That's why she didn't know any of her siblings. Fact 2, she escaped slavery. So even though the white people had enslaved her, she found a way to escape. And she was free. Fact 3, she walked more than 1,000 miles. All on her feet. She was walking everywhere. So I wrote she walked over 1,000 miles, more than 1,000 miles. And fact 4, just like a lot of the other women we learned about, she helped people. So after this whole life that she lived, she wanted to make sure that other people did not get separated from their family. She wanted to make sure that other people were not sold like objects. And so she helped fight against that. She helped women and she helped men. And so these are my 4 facts. And I'll include a scan of it below so that you can see this from your device as well. And then you can copy it or you can write your own facts and I can see it when you submit it to Class Dojo. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being great students, even from home. I miss you very much, but thank you and I appreciate it. Hopefully I see you soon. Goodbye.